Before thought learned its own name, before the world divided itself into past and future, there was listening. Not sound, not language, listening. There is a place within you that does not speak in words. It waits beneath memory, beneath identity, beneath the idea you have of yourself. Tonight you are not asked to understand. You are only asked to enter. Let the noise of the outer world loosen its grip. Let the weight of time soften. You have arrived at the threshold of the inner world. Pause. Breathe. The temple does not open by force. It opens by surrender. Time behaves differently here. Minutes do not march forward. They circle. They echo. In this place, the soul remembers itself, not as a story, but as a presence. Carl Gustav Jung sensed this place, long before he had language for it. As a child, he felt watched not by eyes, but by awareness. Something older than him stood quietly behind his thoughts, not judging, not commanding, observing. And though he could not yet name it, he felt its gravity. Jung did not feel at home in the surface world. While others moved easily through noise and certainty, he lingered in silence. He noticed what most ignored: the spaces between words, the moods beneath faces, the unseen currents shaping human behavior. He felt older than his years, and younger than time itself. Solitude was not emptiness for him. It was intimacy. In silence, something spoke. Not clearly, not directly, but persistently. Jung sensed that he was not one. There was the self that walked in daylight. The child who learned, spoke, obeyed. And there was another. A second presence. Detached, ancient, watching life as though it were already memory. This second self did not rush. It did not fear uncertainty. It existed beyond approval. And Jung learned something unsettling. The self you present to the world is not the one who dreams. Dreams began to arrive. Not gentle ones, not comforting ones. Dreams of descent. Houses with hidden levels beneath them. Staircases leading underground. Chambers older than memory. Jung understood instinctively that these dreams were not personal. They did not belong to his life alone. They belonged to humanity. He was not dreaming them. They were dreaming through him. In one dream, each level beneath the house grew older. Modern rooms gave way to medieval stone. Stone gave way to primitive caves. And at the deepest level, bones, skulls, the ancestors. This was the moment Jung understood. The psyche is layered like the earth, and at its foundation lies the memory of all who came before. You are not only yourself, you are history breathing. Most turn back at this point. Most label the depths as madness, or fantasy, or danger. But Jung felt something else. Reverence. The unconscious was not hostile. It was vast. And what is vast must be approached slowly. The soul does not reveal itself to those who rush. It reveals itself to those who wait. Without knowing why, Jung understood that his life would not be lived on the surface. He would not be a collector of answers. He would be a listener. The psyche had chosen him, not to conquer it, but to witness it. This was not ambition. It was obligation, a calling that cannot be refused. Without cost. Every descent begins with a choice: to remain known, or to become real. Jung crossed the threshold, not knowing where it led, only knowing that not crossing would mean betrayal of the deepest part of himself. The soul always demands honesty, even when it costs everything else. Remain here. Do not rush forward. Let the images settle. Where words cannot reach, the journey has begun, and the inner world has opened its eyes. Once the threshold is crossed, there is no return to innocence. The door does not slam. It closes softly, almost mercifully. What lies ahead is not punishment, but depth. Carl Jung understood this instinctively. To enter the unconscious is to surrender the illusion of control. The soul does not ask for permission. It waits for courage. Beneath the surface of thought lies another world, not empty, not chaotic, alive. Here ideas are born before language. Here, emotions move like weather. Here images arrive without explanation. Jung did not call this darkness evil. He called it unknown. And the unknown, when approached with reverence, becomes revelation. The unconscious does not announce itself. It appears in symbols, in dreams, in sudden feelings with no visible cause. It speaks the language of image and myth. To the rational mind, this language feels dangerous, but to the soul, it feels familiar, as if remembering a home never visited in waking life. Jung once walked beside Freud. Together they stood at the edge of the psyche. But where Freud sought explanation, Jung sought meaning. Freud believed the unconscious was a storage of repression. Jung sensed something more vast, a living depth that could not be reduced without being destroyed. Their paths diverged, not in conflict, but in destiny. Separation is always painful. To walk alone is to lose mirrors. But Jung understood something essential. Truth is not found by agreement. It is found by dissent. And so he stepped away from certainty, from authority, from safety. The unconscious awaited him. Then the images came, not gently, floods washing over cities, fire consuming order, ancient gods stirring beneath modern life. Jung feared he was witnessing madness, but another voice whispered, "This is not illness. This is revelation." The psyche, when ignored, speaks louder. Jung called this passage the night sea journey, a descent into the unknown. Without map or guarantee, many drown here. They cling to reason, as though it were a lifeboat. But reason cannot cross these waters. Only humility can. Instead of resisting the images, Jung listened. He spoke to them. He allowed the psyche to reveal itself without interruption. This was not fantasy. It was relationship. The soul does not want obedience. It wants conversation. The unconscious is not chaos. It is order, not yet understood. When approached with respect, it becomes a guide, not a master, not a tyrant, but an ancient intelligence that has waited for consciousness to mature. You have descended, not to lose yourself, but to find what was missing. Remain here. Do not rush upward. The deeper truths do not shout. They wait. Every descent reaches a point where light no longer leads, not because it has failed, but because it must. There are truths that cannot be seen in brightness. Carl Jung understood this moment. It is the point where the soul asks a single question: are you willing to see what you have hidden? Remain still. The darkness ahead is not an enemy. It is unfinished knowledge. The shadow is born. The moment something is rejected. Every impulse deemed unacceptable. Every feeling denied expression. Every truth postponed. None of these disappear. They wait. Jung did not invent the shadow. He recognized it. The shadow is not evil. It is exiled life. At first, the shadow feels personal. Your anger, your envy, your hunger for power, your grief. These qualities frighten the ego because they threaten its image. But the soul does not care for appearances. What is denied consciousness does not dissolve. It grows autonomous, and eventually, it acts without your permission. What you refuse to see in yourself, you will see everywhere else. This is projection. The enemy outside is often the shadow within. Jung saw this pattern in individuals, in families, in nations. The more virtuous a person believes themselves to be, the darker the shadow they cast. The shadow does not belong only to individuals. Cultures have shadows. Civilizations repress instincts. They cannot integrate. When this happens, violence erupts with moral certainty. Jung witnessed this in his lifetime. He understood something terrifying. Evil is often unconscious, not chosen, not planned, but lived blindly by those who believe themselves righteous. To face the shadow is to abandon innocence. You will no longer be able to believe you are purely good. This is why most refuse the descent. They prefer moral comfort to psychological truth, but the shadow does not want dominance. It wants recognition. It wants relationship. Jung did not fight his shadow. He spoke to it. He asked what it wanted, and the answer was never destruction. It was life, energy, authenticity, wholeness. The shadow carries instincts. The conscious mind needs, but fears to trust. Integration does not mean indulgence. It means responsibility, to know your darkness and choose consciously. The integrated shadow becomes strength. The rejected shadow becomes fate. Jung understood this deeply. Freedom is not the absence of darkness. It is awareness of it. When the shadow is seen, it loses its hunger. It no longer needs to ambush the personality. A new balance emerges. Not purity, but honesty. Not perfection, but depth. This is the foundation of psychological maturity. Remain here. Do not judge what you have seen. The shadow does not disappear overnight. It walks beside you now. Recognized, no longer denied. This is not the end of the descent. It is the beginning of wholeness. When the shadow is acknowledged, something ancient stirs. The psyche exhales. The conflict that consumed so much energy loosens its grip. Carl Jung understood this moment well. After confrontation comes remembrance. Not personal memory, but something deeper. Beneath the personal unconscious lies a greater field. Jung called it the collective unconscious. It does not belong to you alone. It belongs to humanity. Here live the forms that shaped every myth, every religion, every story ever told. These forms are not invented. They are discovered. The mother, the child, the hero, the wise one. They appear in dreams because they are built into the psyche. They are the soul's grammar. Myth is not fiction. It is psychological truth, expressed through image. Long before science, the psyche spoke in story. The hero's journey, the descent and return, the battle with the dragon. These are not entertainment. They are maps. Among the archetypes, one appears again and again. The eternal feminine, she is not woman as society defines her. She is soul. She guides inward. She invites reflection. She draws consciousness toward wholeness. Jung encountered her as anima, not a fantasy, but a bridge to depth. Jung turned to alchemy, not for gold, but for meaning. Alchemy was the psychology of its time. Its symbols described inner transformation, lead into gold, chaos into order, fragmentation into unity. The soul has always sought completion. In moments of psychic balance, people draw circles, mandalas. Jung saw in them the image of the self, not the ego. The center, a symbol of wholeness, emerging naturally when the psyche begins to heal. Religion, for Jung, was not belief. It was experience. Symbols carry power because they touch the unconscious. When symbols are reduced to dogma, they lose their soul. When lived inwardly, they transform. Across time and culture, humanity dreams the same dream. Different faces, different names, the same inner figures, wearing new masks. You are not separate from this story. You are inside it. Remain here. Let the symbols rest. They do not need interpretation. They work beneath understanding. This is remembrance. There comes a moment when the soul no longer looks outward for its meaning. The world grows quieter, not empty, but distant. Carl Jung called this turning individuation, not becoming perfect, not becoming superior, becoming whole. The ego is not an enemy. It is a servant that once believed itself to be king. Individuation begins when the ego learns humility, when it steps aside so something deeper may speak. This is not a collapse. It is a surrender. At the center of the psyche dwells the self, not the personality, not the image you defend. The self is order within chaos. It appears first as symbol, a circle, a light, a presence. You do not meet it by force. You meet it by stillness. The psyche is divided by nature, light and dark, masculine and feminine, instinct and reason. Individuation does not erase opposites. It holds them. When opposites are embraced, energy returns, life deepens, meaning emerges, not from certainty, but from balance. Individuation is not an event. It is a labor. Days pass without revelation. Years unfold without clarity. Yet the work continues. Transformation happens slowly, because the psyche moves at the speed of truth. When the center is found, life no longer overwhelms. Circumstances change. Emotions rise and fall. But something remains steady. Jung called this the self as anchor, not immunity from suffering, but freedom from disintegration. The persona served a purpose. It allowed you to belong, to function, to survive, but it was never meant to be permanent. As individuation deepens, the masks loosen. What remains is quieter, truer. The individuated person does not withdraw from life. Life reorganizes itself. Around the center, work, love, suffering, joy, they no longer define identity. They revolve. The center remains. Wholeness does not announce itself. There is no triumph, only depth, a quiet joy that comes from no longer being divided against oneself. This is not an ending. It is a foundation. Remain here. Do not rush forward. Individuation has no finish line. It unfolds as long as life endures. The work continues, in silence. There are moments that cannot be explained by cause and effect. An image appears in a dream. A symbol emerges in waking life. The two touch. Time bends. Jung called this synchronicity, meaningful coincidence. The psyche does not end at the boundary of the skull. Inner images and outer events sometimes reflect one another, not by force, not by intention, but by meaning. As above, so within. Jung once listened, as a patient described a dream of a golden scarab. At that very moment, a scarab beetle struck the window. The psyche opened. The rational mind fell silent. Meaning entered. Not as belief, as experience. Synchronicity is not magic. It is order, without cause, and a causal connecting principle. Events align, not because one caused the other, but because both arise from the same depth. When synchronicity appears, the symbol becomes alive, a song, a number, a face. It pierces the surface of time. The soul recognizes it before the mind can explain. Synchronicity humbles the ego. It reminds consciousness that it is not in control. Meaning unfolds. Whether the ego consents or not, this is not punishment. It is perspective. Synchronicities do not arrive on demand. They appear when the psyche is receptive, when inner alignment is near, when the soul listens more than it demands. Jung warned against inflation, to believe oneself chosen, special, above others. Synchronicity does not elevate the ego, it dissolves it. Meaning belongs to the self, not the personality. To live symbolically is not to abandon reason, it is to allow depth. Life becomes conversation. Events speak. The soul answers by listening. Remain attentive. Do not grasp. Meaning arrives in its own time. The psyche and the world are not separate. They are different faces of the same mystery. When waking consciousness loosens, another world opens. Not imaginary, not random. Dreams are the psyche, speaking in its native tongue. Images rise when the ego sleeps. Dreams do not explain. They reveal. They speak in symbol, emotion, gesture. To demand logic from a dream is to miss its message. The psyche chooses images because images endure. Dreams compensate for waking imbalance. What consciousness neglects, the unconscious restores. Dreams do not flatter the ego. They seek equilibrium. They guide by contrast. Dream figures are not puppets. They possess autonomy. They surprise. They resist. Jung discovered that the unconscious has intention. It wants to be known, but not controlled. To meet the unconscious awake requires courage. Active imagination is conscious participation without domination. One listens, one responds. Images move. Dialogue unfolds. The psyche breathes. Inner figures speak when invited with respect. They carry wisdom and danger. One does not obey them blindly. One listens, records, reflects. Meaning grows slowly. Art becomes vessel. Drawing, writing, movement. The unconscious enters form without being imprisoned by it. Jung painted his visions to ground them. Expression protects the psyche. When symbols are taken literally, the psyche fractures. One must stand between worlds, neither drowning in image nor rejecting it. Balance preserves sanity. Dreams do not demand action. They ask for witness. Seen, honored, they change the soul. Ignored, they return with force. The psyche remembers itself. Through attention, carry the dream gently. Do not analyze too quickly. Let it echo. The unconscious speaks between worlds. You are learning to listen.